Today, we are extending ourselves 10 years ahead, and I'm sure some of you have already done this in preparation for this event, wondering what will be going on in the land of professional associations 10 years hence. And we're all vitally interested in this because I'm sure just about everyone in the room, if not everyone in the room, is a member of at least one professional association, and depending on your age, may have been a member of at least one professional association for quite a large number of years. I suppose today we're not necessarily assuming that professional associations have a future. Now, if in saying that, I made some of you feel slightly startled, then it's probably a good thing you came along today.
Now, moving into the contemporary era, I think there is a date, the 9th of November, 1989, which really represents a lot of the shifts that have happened over the last decades. The Berlin Wall came down. So many of the boundaries in our past coming down. That was the date when finally people were allowed to cross the border, the reintegration. Now we've had, I suppose, the fragmentation, various other designs, but it was just before that we'd already had TCP/IP, the underlying Internet Protocol. 2 years later, after that, we had HTML and HTTP, the foundations, and these were standards, open standards that started to allow the flow of information from bounded domains of information to now open domains of information. So late 80s, see inside the political crumbling of the walls coming down. In the early 90s, just the beginning of this opening out of the walls around data, around information. So I think an interesting analogy, or I suppose again a profession of its own, is the medical profession, where it was essentially there was protected information. Only doctors could have access to that information. Of course, that is now laid open to everyone. And that fundamentally changes the nature. You cannot have those closed walls around the guild, around the profession, around information, because that flows so freely. And what we are starting to see in the world of connection is the rise of a network world on all fronts. Now, one of the interesting aspects around these networks that we see in our brains, in society, in organizations, in the way in which value is created, is indeed this idea of scale-free networks. Now, a scale-free network is one that has the same structure, the same topology, irrespective of its scale. The internet, in fact, has exactly the same fundamental structure as it did 20 years ago. But it is just larger. And we're starting to see this nature of this connectivity, with the way we start to see the new connections come in. We're starting to see the shift to more and more of these scale-free structures and networks. And one example is in organizations, where of course organizations have always been networks, despite the hierarchical chart that define them. Yet, as we start to see the ability for any individual to connect to any other individual through the organization, any number of needs, we're starting to see the scale-free topology, scale-free network start to be apparent far more in organizations, in industries, in the way the sharing of knowledge and information, in almost every aspect of our world. So this puts into question the role of this boundary of an association. The association is bounded by a definition in being able to say, well, this is what comes in and that comes without that. So in these shifts, clearly we are seeing some massive challenges to what associations are. Yet at the same time, we are creating conditions where the value of an association, I believe, can potentially be far greater than it's been in the past. Association currently is almost like a reflection of the current and the past. It is trying to aggregate that. So how is it that you pull out, you try to emerge from the members of an association something which is about creating the future, creating the past, and that is partly around the leaders of that association, but it's also about to bring out, to self-organize, to catalyze, to create a vision for the future, which is compelling. Which is, yes, we can see this is worthwhile, this is achievable. this is aligned with all of our membership. It challenges and moving beyond that. So that vision has to be part of what the future of an association is. And the future not just for the association, but of course more importantly for the profession itself. What is the profession becoming? What could it be? How is it that we can create that? Is this compelling? Is this achievable? Is this worthwhile? Does this get the energy of everybody involved to be able to do that? And I think without that vision, then associations will be static.
I will just start a little bit by, I'm trying to get to a point where we can talk about some of the key challenges and some of the issues around this question. But I will start a little bit historically around these things. And I think the important is to say that the pattern we see now has been repeated earlier, right? It's very important that. There are very few things in history that are completely new on this area. So we used to have this type of scenario in the old Roman times, where you have something that were the precedents of the guild structure. And basically they had a pattern of development which was reasonably similar to what I think we see today. So firstly, it was a focus on the interest of the trade, in the skills and the mercantile sense to benefit the trade through whatever political influence was possible. And they wanted to go from, generating competitive advantages through developing and protecting knowledge-embedded individuals to generating comparative advantage by achieving monopoly rents, if I talk about it in economic terms. And of course, when they were perceived to stretch their monopoly rent requirement too far, they got disbanded. In the Roman times, that was a bit easier. Somebody has decided you can't be around any longer. So, so that it is. But this took some time, and it's interesting to look at this journey and then try to reflect a little bit about what we have today.
Thank you for the invitation, James. It's always very stimulating to be amongst those who are thinking about the future in a creative and disciplined way. This is a case study that I'm most familiar with. So what James didn't mention, that I, in my youth, was a professor of medicine and have followed that profession, but don't work in it at all. And I spent 15 years in the Melbourne Business School teaching and researching in business strategy. And really that's what I think I bring to bear on the legal profession in particular, but others, including the accountancy profession, consulting, engineering, management consulting, and a variety of the more niche professions like the actuaries and the patent attorneys in the business space. What we've seen is the evolution, and both Ross and Goran this morning touched on it in many ways, of these business advisory professions, if we have a sub-collective noun for them, emerging from classic professions to businesses practicing a profession. And as the business imperatives, the profit imperatives have overtly entered and scale has entered, we've seen, particularly in the field that I know best, the law, all around the world, massive change in the last 10, 15 years, which we believe is accelerating and changing the face of how law is practiced in advising businesses and governments, and increasingly in how the transformation of B2C to private individuals is being transformed as well.
And when we talk about professional development, there's two phases to that. There's those that we want to bring into the profession, so attracting the talent into the profession, and those who want to become new professionals in our space. And then there's those who are in the profession today that have to learn to adapt and change. So we'll start with some interesting insights. Union membership in the United States peaked in the 1950s with 32.5% of the workforce were in a union, and less than 10% of people were in a professional association. As of last year, union membership in the United States is at 10%, and professional association membership was 23% of the workforce. So we've flipped around here. If you look at Australia, it peaked in the 1970s, the union membership at 57%, is now at 18%. which is almost the same as the membership in the workforce of professional associations. So the professional association has gone forward, the union membership has gone backwards. And a key driver to that has to be seen as the benefits of that and the relevance of the professional association. So we've done some work about why is it that people want to be a member of our association. And the research really lands heavily on three things. One is the learning opportunities, which is great from my perspective running an education team. However, what was really interesting in that analysis is 1 in 4 members didn't see that there was any benefit from ongoing professional development, which for me is very disappointing, and for them I think a huge challenge. In terms of other things they're looking for, it's the brand association. So they like being a member of that brand, of that designation. It started off giving them a career opportunity, but now it's a matter of belonging, a matter of society, and a matter of pride. And the other area is leadership and advocacy. So they're looking more and more for the professional associations to represent them as a body and thought processes. So we've talked about Susskind a lot today, and I'm stealing from it again because I thought this was a very good summary of what it is to be a profession. So they have to have technical knowledge and apply that knowledge at expert levels and be available and not available to the general population. And this is where the disintermediation of technology will most affect us. The admission requires credentialing, so it's an education, indenture, show that you can apply that learning and that you're of good character. So that's an important criteria. And typically it's an area that's regulated, so we're granted exclusive rights, and we have a royal charter, and we have different rules applying to us. And the work should clearly be stated standards of conduct. And then we're bound by a common set of values, ethical standards that go beyond the formal regulation. And lastly, leverage and global collaboration. So we're a member of a group called the Global Accounting Alliance, and its membership is up there on the board. It's over 1 million members, service 180 countries, but the truth is there's pretty much 10 major countries that grouping is in. What we know is when you talk to those people, we all have the same issues. There's no really big ticket item that's unique to one country or another. We're all seeing the same challenges. And so what GAA used to be was a way for members to move from country to country and get recognition, so you didn't have to resit your professional exams. It's now moving to a very collaborative development platform for us to share ideas, share learning, and share actually curriculum, so that we're not all inventing the wheel with limited resources. So what you're seeing out of that is a lot of the things that we're developing, we're sharing, and likewise we're getting a lot of things that are being developed shared with us. It's early days, and like any big organisation, it's not the most efficient yet, but I can see the time where we'll get much more collaborative in real time, and it's sharing. The GAA education directors are all in Australia last week of April, so we're hosting them in Sydney for a week to share our positions on a number of key issues, the development, talk about technological changes for the profession and therefore the way we need to teach the profession and tools to teach the profession. So for us, in terms of professional development, it's hard to see what the future will be, particularly 10 years from now. But it's critical for us that we keep going with change and getting our membership to see that change. And more you'll see us focusing on people already as members that need to change. The market reacts in certain ways, and so a lot of our members have already adjusted for changes in environment. Already a lot of them have been impacted by technology. but we see it as our role to help them transition as well.
I've been asked to talk about the influence of accreditation from a university perspective, how accreditation is influencing higher education. I want to bring a different lens because we've been looking at professional accreditation from the role of the profession, and I want to look at it now from the role as a higher education provider. I've basically been involved in about 12 types of professions or academic and professional accreditations as part of my job. So for me, I can compare and contrast how different professions are seeking to deal with this question of accreditation. And I suppose the big question I want to ask you to think about today is, to what problem is accreditation of higher education programs the solution? To what problem is accreditation the solution to? So let me just begin with describing how we are involved with accreditation. There's 3 steps in accreditation. Typically, there's the step of self-assessment against a set of standards. Secondly, we submit that to an external body, which may be an agency, it may be a set of peer-like members, and they review our evidence of performance against those standards. And then thirdly, if we get past that tick, we then continue to improve, actioning the changes that the accrediting body has given us. And if the accreditation agency involves us, we may be involved in accrediting other like-minded members, and we may even have a chance to refine the standards. Now, this model I'm talking about here is the most thorough. It would have these 3 steps. Now, there's also 3 types of standards that you may have. And again, I look at professional and academic accreditation, and they vary immensely. Some accreditation bodies rely only on inputs, these lot, and occasionally processes. Others rely on inputs, processes, and outcomes. But I have to tell you, the trend worldwide now, and quickly, is to move to demonstrating outcomes. Do the performance meet the outcomes? So they're the 3 steps and the 3 types of standards. What we're particularly interested in with professional accreditation is this one here. Are the graduates going through our programs in response to professional accreditation that we have of our higher education programs, are they meeting the outcomes that is expected?
I think the topic today really reaches deep into the heart of the organisation, and it's a credit to Chartered Accountants that you're addressing it head on. So congratulations to you, because I think it's something that will benefit and take you forward into the 21st century. Today's discussion highlights the complexity of the environment that we're all operating in, global, competitive, and to add to this, we're also in transition, which means that there are a lot of different players at a lot of different stages in the continuum. So I thought I might just take a minute to elaborate on this complex landscape in which all professions are operating, and in so doing, hope to summarize some of the major issues that were raised today and provide you with a slightly different perspective. Firstly, the educational landscape, and Mark talked a little bit about the breadth now of the vast educational landscape. In the last 25 years, the number of educational providers has increased exponentially as the demand for skills continues to grow with the development of global economies. And over the past 5 years, technology has impacted dramatically on the delivery of education, making it accessible to so many more people. So today, a program of study may consist of a traditional university program on a campus, or a university program online, individual chosen accredited courses or subjects through a university, certified or non-certified MOOCs, or a hybrid combination of any of the above, open to accreditation by a university or potentially certified by some independent agency. And these developments have presented serious challenges to the delivery model of university education. And now, as we've entered into the second phase of MOOCs, Universities have pretty well overcome their initial anxiety about their role in relevance, and they've adapted very well. As Ross mentioned this morning, universities are now also no longer exclusive holders of content, and they know that. So they see themselves also as curators of content for specific purposes. They understand now that their role is not necessarily providing the information, but more importantly, teaching people the right questions to ask. And for that reason, many of them have now flipped the classroom in this redesigned learning ecosystem.